Hey YouTube, I'm Jessie, your friendly local boondock ballistician, and with us today I have been so excited to share with you the H&R 635. I had a couple of other videos lined up before this, but my god, have I been like a little kid on Christmas Eve, both waiting for this to come in and to finally be able to share it with you guys. As always, like, comment, subscribe. I actually really do love reading through the comments and interacting with you guys. I try to get to as many as I can, but let's get started on her. The 635 here obviously doesn't have some crazy history like the other milsurps that I've had on the channel, but I do think it's still worth talking about how she came to be. So in 1982, Colt introduced this beauty into the market, and while it wasn't some crazy prolific design, it did actually find its way into our hands of a few forces, like the LAPD SWAT teams, the IDF Special Forces. Interestingly enough, most notably is probably the DOE. The inception of this design really only made sense when you consider the growing popularity of the M16 at the time and the increased love for the 9mm cartridge. You were starting to see 9mm in a lot more submachine guns and in semi-auto pistols. So really just taking all of the classic M16 controls and squishing them down into a nice little compact 10.5 size just made sense. So unlike the M16, this does operate using a direct blowback system. And you can see here that it utilizes the Uzi style magazines. Of course, a variation, just so that they obviously fit and will lock the bolt back on the last round. Something else you might notice on this is the lack of forward assist, which for me is a huge bonus. I think those absolutely always get in the way if you go to use the charging handle, always breaks my nails. I also think that it makes the gun look a lot cleaner not to have it. So if you fall into that category, that ballpark like I do, something else you might appreciate. And then another thing to note here is that they do utilize the classic A1 sights, of course, fitted out to 50 meters and 100 meters, which makes perfect sense. You're shooting 9, don't need to go any further out than that. And of course, the most classic feature on this is the A1 carry handle. And before anyone here comments, you should never carry by the carry handle. Listen, all right, that idea was propagated off of drill sergeants wanting to make sure that their privates were tactical. It is stupid inefficient to try and carry from here and then shoulder your weapon. So in a realistic combat standpoint, yes, it does not make sense, but there is nothing wrong with carrying by the carry handle. Just be aware of where your muzzle's going, be safe, and it is perfectly fine. Interestingly enough, the carry handle was born out of kind of necessity. If you guys are familiar with the classic M16 design or like the AR-10s, then you would know that the charging handle was actually on the top of the receiver, and you can see kind of what looked like an upside down trigger right up on the top here. And made sense that you wanted to kind of protect that area so it wouldn't snag on things. Rare W for engineers here. Stoner was actually smart enough to say, hey, if I'm putting this big bulky carry handle up here, let's actually make it a little bit more useful, and decided to integrate the rear sights into this as well. So the whole system really just became efficient for both the charging handle's sake and the sight's sake. So when you consider a classic AR style platform, you can see here that the barrel is perfectly in line with the brace. So when you shoulder something like this, the carry handle actually winds up putting the iron sights in pretty much an ideal situation to be able to maintain a solid cheek weld and to look down through them. So actually a really intelligent design and good use of something that was already there. Although it does make it a little tricky if you're looking to mount other optics, which probably one of the bigger reasons you're not seeing carry handles as much in militaries anymore. Not that it's not doable, it's just obviously little extra steps. But even though they're falling out of favor in the militaries, we are seeing a resurgence in kind of the civilian market, which I am all for. I think they're absolutely gorgeous looking. Outside of all of those little random tidbits of history, I do think that this firearm is an absolute pleasure to shoot. It is extremely comfortable to shoulder. I had a couple of friends try this, all with different body sizes, different levels of skills, you name it, and every single one of them found this to be extremely comfortable, just a very natural, good fit and easy to use. The handguard up here is a fantastic size. It is very sturdy. I know sometimes you see this style and it's kind of just like wobbly feeling, like cheap, or it's like massive and impossible to get a good grip on. So I think I really appreciate that. I use it with the brace fully extended out. Maybe I'll wind up changing that as I get an optic mounted on here or something, but I don't think you even need to take advantage of any of those options. You might want to. So this is obviously 9mm, which means you're not going to expect a lot of recoil to begin with. But even with that, I found this to be extremely minimal recoil when compared to something like the Scorpion. This thing basically does not move. Something I note too is that the addition of a suppressor on this really doesn't add in any of those spicy extra gases that you might see more commonly when adding on cans. I have extremely sensitive eyes, so I was a little worried when I got this that shooting it suppressed would wind up just making me cry terribly. But there is nothing, no problems. I can get a good amount of rounds out rapidly and still not feel any of those extra residual gases burning back towards me. You can buy this with either 20 or 32 round magazines, which is great. That is a very large amount of rounds, which obviously makes sense considering that's the standard Uzi mag, but I still do think it's a bit more than what you see with a lot of more modern PCCs. I will note though that I had some difficulty when I first got this trying to find magazine pouches that properly held retention on them. I had luck with the S-Tac tall pistol mag pouches. Tried a couple of things. The chest rig that I was wearing throughout this video held them well, but yeah, definitely a little trial and error to find something that actually held them in properly. If I were to have any complaints about this firearm, be honest, I did have some feed issues. You can see in some of these clips somewhere throughout this video, there were actually a couple of failure to feeds. I had a couple of failure to extracts. I was not as smooth running as I had hoped for. Bit of a disappointing range day, but I do think that it might be attributed to the magazines. So one thing that I was going to note even before I had a proper shoot through was that when the bolt was forward, putting in a filled magazine was a bit tricky. It did not like to seat right. The bolt was very picky as to being guided forward. It really needed to be manhandled to properly feed. So, I mean, I just had a terrible malfunction. You can see here, kind of blends in with carbon at this point, but the round managed to get stuck back in there. Yeah, little tricky to undo. And I will also note that while these mags aren't bad to fill, that it kind of felt like around the 4th or 5th round, it hit like a wall, got a little trickier, and then was easier past that. So I need to do some proper diagnostic shooting here, but I do think that maybe the spring tension or something along those lines was attributing to some of the failures that I had. So while I was originally just gonna say, hey, practice because, you know, the mags are a bit different of a feel than what I'm used to with other firearms, I'm gonna change that advice to practice with them because they're different feeling, and also it might be an area of problem for this design. Something that's very common for 9mm PCCs with long mags like this, like the Strybog for example, is that they do have a curved magazine. The Strybog actually originally had problems with their magazines and evidently claimed that it was completely fixed by the introduction of the curved design. So it's possible that the straight design here has issues with the spring tensioning and feeding that maybe this isn't ideal. We'll keep you guys posted as I figure out more on that though. I do have to, like I said, run some testing. The other complaint that I might have, I don't have a problem with this, but if you notice, the brace back here is a very thin blade. That is tiny. While this firearm has no recoil, and I certainly do not mind it, I can understand how maybe if after a very long range day and a lot of shots, you find something like that uncomfortable to shoulder. I didn't have issues. There's no shove in. I think it fits snug, but I can understand why someone would want to change it out. It is, however, super easy to change out, so I don't think that's a very big downside, just something to consider. You can see here that I do obviously plan on making some modifications. One of the obvious customizations that I've already done was changing the muzzle device out here. So obviously I can shoot this with a can. But you can also see here on the front sight post that I do have 2 pick rails on either side. because eventually, hopefully in the near future, I'd like to put a laser and light up there. Like I said earlier in the video, I do want to put a optic on this at some point. I already purchased a mount, so I can sit it right in here, but that'll be a nice new addition that I'm looking forward to. And then obviously a sling, that's a given. But otherwise, I do think this is overall a really beautiful design. I think it's extremely comfortable and easy to use. And if you're in the market for a PCC, something to consider, even with the issues that I've had. Hopefully it's nothing major, and I'll keep you guys posted as I figure out what exactly caused those problems. But otherwise, highly recommended firearm. So that's really all I had for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you guys next time. That's a big stick.